The first thing I noticed about Dante Salvetor was not his face. It was the sound. A soft metallic click in the doorway, clean and final, like the locking of something expensive. The whole restaurant seemed to hear it at once. Forks paused, voices lowered. Even the dishwasher hiss from the kitchen suddenly felt too loud, like it had forgotten where it was. I was on my knees beside a burst bottle of Barolo, staring at wine crawling between white tiles like blood that had chosen a more elegant color. "Don't just kneel there," Carlo Tavelli snapped. "Clean it." My right cheek still stung where his ring had caught me. Not a slap exactly. A shove too hard, a hand too careless. The difference mattered to men like Carlo and to no one else. Paolo stood behind me with both hands clamped over his mouth, his busboy apron crooked and his eyes wet with terror. 17, skinny, always apologizing before anyone asked. He had dropped the tray because I'd yanked him back from the path of a waiter carrying a tower of plates. That waiter would have walked straight through him. The bottle had gone over instead. Onto the floor, onto Carlo's polished shoe, onto the black leather ledger he kept too close and trusted too much. I said, "Clean it." Carlo's voice dropped lower, meaner. "And if the old man asks why numbers ran, I'll say the boy did it." Paolo made a small sound. I reached back without looking and caught his wrist. "Go to the kitchen." He didn't move. Now, the front door opened wider. Cold night air moved across the room, carrying exhaust and winter and something darker underneath. A smell like expensive cologne laid over stone and smoke. Men entered first, not loud men. Worse, quiet men in dark coats with patient eyes. Then the last one stepped in. He was taller than everyone else in the room without trying to be. Black overcoat. Black gloves, a face built from hard lines and self-control. He held a silver lighter in one hand, lid flipped open, the flame painting amber over his knuckles for one lazy second before he snapped it shut. Click, Carlo's spine changed shape. Mr. Salvetor, so that was him. I had heard the name the way everyone in this part of the city had heard it, in lowered voices, in unfinished stories. Dante Salvetor owned restaurants, shipping companies, half a block of Little Italy, and the kind of silence that made grown men forget words. He took in the room once, the spilled wine. Carlo's ledger, me on the floor, Paolo shaking behind me. Then he looked directly at me. No one had ever told me how dangerous stillness could be until that moment. He did not need to raise his voice. He did not need to do anything at all. The danger sat there in his patience. "Why?" he asked. "Is my waitress crying?" "My waitress." Carlo hurried forward. "Nothing, sir, she's clumsy." The boy dropped. It was me. I did not plan to say it. It just came out, flat and immediate. My hand tightened around Paolo's wrist before he could be sacrificed for convenience. Dante's eyes shifted to Carlo, then back to me. "Explain." I got to my feet because kneeling in front of him felt worse than the sting in my cheek. Wine had soaked my tights. I could feel it cooling on my skin. "It was my fault," I said. My voice trembled and that made me hate it, so I forced the next part steadier. Paolo was in the way. I pulled him back. The bottle fell. Carlo wanted to blame him because the ledger got wet. Carlo laughed too quickly. "She's upset. Girls cry over and he steals our tips," I said. The room died, truly died. Even the kitchen noise seemed to flinch. Carlo stared at me like I had put a knife in his throat. Maybe I had. "You stupid." "Enough." Dante said it softly. That was the worst part, softly. Carlo obeyed before the word finished breathing. Dante took one step closer. He was near enough now that I could see the tiny scar at his jaw and the gold in the dark brown of his eyes. Not warm gold. Burnt gold, the kind you got at the bottom of a pan if you stopped paying attention 1 second too late. "You should have lied," he said. I swallowed. "Probably. Why didn't you?" "Because I was tired. Because Paolo looked like my brother used to when he still believed older people could save him. Because if I let one more smaller person pay for something that should land on me, I was going to become the kind of coward I already hated around me." Instead I said because it was true. Something shifted in his expression, not softness, nothing so simple, more like interest dragged reluctantly into existence. Carlo found his courage in the pause. "Mr. Salvetor, you know how staff can be, dramatic, emotional. She's only a waitress." Dante did not look at him when he answered. "I know exactly what she is." Then he extended one gloved hand. For a horrible second I thought he meant me. Instead he held it palm up toward Carlo. "The ledger." Carlo hesitated. One of the men by the door moved so slightly I almost missed it. Carlo noticed. He handed the ledger over with fingers that had gone damp. Dante opened it, water-warped pages, running columns. Names I did not know, numbers I had only glimpsed when Carlo kept it near the register at close. He turned 3 pages, then 4. The silver lighter clicked again in his other hand. Once. Thoughtfully, "When were you going to tell me," he asked Carlo, "that you had been skimming from me?" Carlo made a sound that belonged in an animal's throat. "Sir, please." "I can explain, I'm sure." He shut the ledger and handed it to the man on his left, a lean, fair-haired one in a charcoal suit whose gaze flicked over me once with professional concern, not lust. Not pity, something more complicated. Warning, maybe. Dante finally looked at Carlo, no raised voice, no threat, just the kind of stillness that made my lungs forget their work. Take him downstairs. Carlo began to babble then, family, mistake, one chance. I did not hear the words so much as the shape of them. Two men took him by the arms, his shoes scraped the tile. No one in the restaurant moved to help, no one would. Paolo started crying behind me. Dante's gaze shifted to the boy. Go home, Paolo blinked. Yes, sir, tonight's wages, Dante said to the suited man, for everyone double out of Tavelli's office. A murmur rippled through the room, stunned and frightened at once. The suited man nodded. Yes, Dante, not sir, not Mr. Salvador, just Dante, which somehow made him seem even more dangerous. He looked back at me. At my wet tights, my red cheek, my hand still wrapped around Paolo like I could stop the whole city from taking what it wanted if I squeezed hard enough. You saw the ledger, he said. It wasn't a question. Yes, how much, not much. You remember numbers? I should have lied then, I knew it even as I answered. Enough. His eyes narrowed by a degree. Name one? I closed my own eyes for a second. The page had flashed when the wine hit it. Column, date, shipment, 32 cases, Pier 14, Thursday. I remembered numbers the way I remembered ingredients. They arranged themselves somewhere behind my ribs and stayed there. When I repeated the line, the fair-haired man went very still. Dante said nothing at all. The whole room seemed to tilt. Carlo was yelling from somewhere farther away now, maybe basement stairs, maybe hell. I looked at the front windows, at the street beyond them, at the life that had been mine an hour ago. Double shift, rent due. Rosa's pastry textbook waiting in my apartment because I bought used copies when I could. My brother Marco texting excuses I no longer believed. Small life, mine. Dante closed the distance between us until I had to tip my chin up. Do you live alone? I hated how cold my hands were. Why? Answer. Yes, not tonight. The words landed before their meaning did. My heart stumbled once. I beg your pardon. His gaze dropped to Paolo's wrist in my hand, then rose again. You protected the boy, admirable, unwise. He turned to the suited man. Luca, send 2 men to collect her things. I found my voice because panic gave it back. No, that earned me the smallest pause, not offense, surprise. No, he repeated, I'm not going anywhere with you. One dark eyebrow moved. Across the room, somebody crossed himself. Dante slipped the lighter into his coat pocket. Little lioness, he said, and the name held no affection at all, just cold recognition. You already are. He stepped aside and the door behind him opened. One door in my life had just shut forever. I had never been inside a house where the silence had staff. That was the thought I had at 2:13 in the morning. Standing barefoot on polished marble in a borrowed cashmere robe that smelled faintly of lavender starch and someone else's expensive detergent. The Salvador house was not a house, really. It was a limestone mansion on the Upper East Side pretending to be civilized. The foyer alone was bigger than my entire apartment. Lamps pooled gold over dark wood and framed oil paintings. A staircase curved upward with the kind of confidence I had only ever seen in women who had never had to check their bank balance before buying groceries. But the most unnerving part was the quiet. Not empty quiet, occupied quiet. The quiet of armed men posted in corners pretending not to listen. The quiet of doors that closed too softly to be innocent. The quiet of wealth that did not need to prove itself because everyone else did it for it. I missed the noise of my neighborhood so badly my chest hurt. You look like you're considering theft, a male voice said behind me. I turned too fast. The driver from the restaurant leaned in the doorway, one shoulder against the frame, tie loosened, dark hair falling over his forehead. He was handsome in a careless, irritating way, with quick eyes and a mouth that looked made for bad ideas. I was considering escape. He nodded gravely. Also valid, sadly difficult. We have cameras, locks, and Luca who can smell a lie through 2 walls and a prayer. Are you trying to comfort me? No, I'm trying to manage expectations. Comfort is Rosa's department. He stepped farther in and put a tray on the table beside me. Tea, toast, a bowl of broth. Eat, I'm not hungry. That's excellent because I'm on a no-carb reset and the toast is ruining my spiritual growth. Despite everything, a breath almost laughed out of me. Almost, he saw it. There she is, humanity. I don't know who you are, Nico Mancini. Driver, bodyguard, underappreciated genius, and future husband of the terrifying woman who runs this kitchen. Does she know that? Rosa knows everything. She simply refuses to reward sincerity. He sighed toward the ceiling. Cruelty is her love language. I should not have smiled. I did anyway. Nico pointed at it triumphantly. Good, keep doing that. The boss likes people alive. The smile vanished. Stop calling him that. What boss? He is the boss. I meant alive. His expression changed a little, not less light exactly, just truer. Then don't make him choose between your feelings and your safety. He won't choose your feelings. That settled coldly between my ribs. A woman in her 50s appeared in the doorway then, broad-hipped, iron-gray hair braided down her back, apron immaculate. She looked at Nico with the kind of immediate disappointment only family or Italians could achieve. "Why is she standing?" the woman demanded. Nico raised both hands. "Because she values drama. Because I wasn't told I was imprisoned," I said. The woman's dark eyes came to me. They were not unkind, just very practiced. "Prisoners do not get cashmere ragazza, sit. Drink while it is hot." That was the first thing Rosa Esposito ever said to me. The second was, "If Nico steals your toast, hit him with the tray." "I would never," Nico said, already reaching. She smacked the back of his hand with a wooden spoon she had apparently brought with her like a badge of office. He recoiled in offense. "See. This is what I survive for love." Rosa ignored him and turned to me. "You're Sophia. Yes, you wait tables, you should not wait tables." Something in me tightened. That sounded insultingly specific. It was meant to. She glanced at my hands, at the faint burns near my wrist from sugar work, and I wondered how much she saw in a second. "You pipe with your dominant hand and carry plates with your shoulders. You move like a pastry girl stuck in the wrong job." I stared at her. Nico brightened. "I said the same thing. You said she looked sad in a professional way," Rosa snapped, which was observant. It was idiotic. He turned to me. "I want the record to show that I am beloved here." "No one would testify to that," Rosa said. For one strange moment in the middle of that armed, polished, terrible house, warmth moved through the room. Then Dante walked in and took it with him. He wore no coat now. Just a dark suit with the jacket unbuttoned and his sleeves pushed once at the wrist, as if he had been working rather than sleeping. The house shifted around his presence, not dramatically. That was what made it real. Men straightened without looking obvious. Nico stopped reaching for toast. Even Rosa set the spoon down. His gaze touched the tray, the robe, my bare feet, my face. "Did she eat?" "No," Nico said. "A little," Rosa said at the same time. Dante looked at me. "Which is it?" I should have said neither. Some foolish fragment of pride made me answer honestly. "A little." "Finish." I folded my arms. "You don't own my stomach." Something unreadable moved through Nico's face. Anticipation, prayer, poor man. Dante came closer, stopping on the other side of the low table. "No," he said. "I own the problem created when you faint because you would rather be difficult than sensible." Heat climbed my throat. "You can't keep me here." "I can." "On what grounds?" "You witnessed financial records that belong to me. The man who skimmed them may have copied them for people I dislike. You remembered enough to become useful." "Useful?" I hated the way the word sounded in his mouth, clean, unashamed. "It is not an insult," he said. "It isn't praise either." For the first time, the edge of something like approval flickered in his eyes. It irritated me so much I could have thrown the tea. "I have a job," I said. Had the single word struck harder than if he had raised his voice. My chin lifted. "Then I'll get another." "Nico?" "Yes, boss. Tell her what happened to Tavelli." Nico cleared his throat. "The restaurant is closed, temporarily." "Closed? Health code issue," he said solemnly. "Rats, mostly moral." Rosa snorted. I stared at Dante. "You destroyed my workplace. I removed a thief. You also removed my rent." For a beat, nothing moved. Then Dante reached inside his jacket and put a small white envelope on the table between us. My name was written across the front in severe black ink. "Your rent," he said. 3 months. I did not touch it. Rosa went still. Nico looked at the ceiling like a man who did not wish to die in an expensive kitchen. "I didn't ask you for money." "No. You asked me for honesty. I asked you for nothing, which is why you are still alive." The truth of it hit so hard I had to look away. He let the silence stretch. It wasn't cruel silence. That would have been easier. It was purposeful. The kind used to make other people hear themselves think. Finally, he said, "Your apartment has already been checked." 2 men were waiting in the alley behind it. Ice slid under my skin. For the first time that night, fear rose clean and total. I whispered, "For me, for whoever saw the ledger." Nico's lightness was gone now. Rosa S. too. Dante watched my face with terrible steadiness. "This is not punishment, Sophia. It is containment. I'm supposed to feel better because you chose a more elegant word." "No," he said, "you are supposed to understand the facts." I hated that I did. Rosa pushed the broth closer to me. "Drink." My hands shook when I lifted the cup. Dante noticed. Of course he noticed. He said quieter, "There are rules while you stay here." I almost laughed at the phrase while, as if he had given me a choice. "I don't leave alone," I guessed. "No, I don't use the front gate." "No, I don't ask what's in the basement." His gaze held mine. "Correct," Nico muttered. "See, adaptable." Rosa elbowed him. Dante continued. "You do not answer unknown numbers. You tell Luca if anyone from your old life contacts you." And if I tell you to get down, run, or stay behind me, you will do it the first time. Something in his tone made my fingers tighten around the cup. Why? I asked. That was the wrong question. I knew it the second it left me, because now he had to answer it. Or choose not to. He chose not to. Instead, he bent just slightly enough to bring his voice closer to mine and lower than the room. Because if danger reaches this house, he said, I would prefer not to scrape you off the floor. Then he straightened all distance again. He turned to leave. At the doorway he paused without looking back. You may hate my rules, little lioness. His hand closed around the silver lighter in his pocket. I heard the faintest metallic click. You will keep them. By the third day, I understood that Dante Salvator's empire ran on three things: information, fear, coffee. The coffee was the easiest part to survive. I learned the rhythm of the house in pieces. Security rotation changed at dawn and dusk. Rosa ruled the kitchen like a constitutional monarch with a rolling pin. Luca Ferretti, Dante's consigliere, ran numbers in a first-floor office lined with old books and newer sins. Nico floated everywhere, carrying messages, gossip, and the persistent conviction that carbs were a conspiracy. Dante moved through it all like the axis other men rotated around. He was not loud. He did not need to be. Doors opened before he touched them. Men stopped talking when he entered. Italian threaded through hallways in low, precise bursts, then vanished when he looked their way. I began to understand what real power was. Not violence, though there was violence under everything here like wiring and walls. Power was efficiency. Power was being the reason a room changed shape. And I was learning the edges of the cage. My phone stayed in Luca's office unless I asked for it. My apartment keys sat in a bowl beside the back stairs like a joke. Marco had called twice the second day, but Luca only told me after Dante already knew. My brother left no voicemail. He never did when he wanted money. On the fourth morning, Rosa found me standing in her kitchen at 6:30 with a notebook in my hand and sleep I had not fully survived. You're hovering, she said. I'm breathing. Badly. Move, I moved. She shoved a bowl toward me, egg whites, sugar already weighed, almond flour in a tin. My pulse jumped before I could stop it. What is this? Work, she said. Unless you prefer pacing holes into my tile. I thought I wasn't allowed knives. You are not. Spatulas, yes. Trauma, no. That pulled a real laugh from me, quick and startled. She hid her satisfaction by turning toward the oven, so I worked. Macaron shells first. Then pate sucré for the tartlets she sold to Dante's guests when respectable people came to pretend this house was not built on blood. The motion settled me. Whisk, fold, pipe. Tap the tray twice against the counter. In pastry there was order, temperature mattered, time mattered, sugar obeyed laws even when people did not. Rosa watched me in the blunt silence of a woman testing whether someone deserved the ingredients they touched. You were trained, she said finally. My mother taught me. Then I took classes when I could afford them. And now I waitress, her mouth flattened. A waste. I should have bristled. Instead, I found myself blinking too hard over egg whites. She looked away as if granting privacy without softness. Make me something not on my menu. I hesitated. Now, you heard me, so I did. Espresso sponge because I liked bitterness when it had purpose. Orange blossom cream because my mother used to say sweetness without brightness was just lazy. A sponge sugar dome thin enough to crack under the slightest pressure. I worked from memory and instinct, the old language of my hands returning more quickly than I wanted to admit. Nico wandered in when I was torching the sugar. He stopped dead. What, he said reverently, is that? None of your business. Art, he leaned closer. Can I eat it? No. Can I smell it? No. Can I look at it while saying supportive things? Rosa swatted him with a towel. Get out. He clutched his chest. This house does not honor genius. I set the finished dessert on the steel counter and stepped back. It looked stronger than it was, dark base, pale middle. Glass shell above it, clear and beautiful in one breath from fracture. Rosa's eyes sharpened. Name, I almost said I don't know. Instead, before I could stop myself, I heard my own voice answer. Second skin. Nico blinked. That is wildly concerning. Rosa cut a spoon through the sugar dome. It shattered with a sound so delicate it hurt. She tasted, closed her eyes, opened them again. Too much orange blossom for the old men, she said. My heart sank. But perfect for grief. Something hot lodged behind my ribs. Nico had gone uncharacteristically quiet. He watched the dessert, then me, then the doorway over my shoulder. I turned. Dante stood there. I had not heard him come in. His gaze was on the broken sugar shell, on the orange cream exposed beneath it, then on my hands where caramel threads still clung to my fingertips. No one spoke. Rosa, with more courage than sense, slid the plate toward him. Taste. He did. The room stilled around the small motion of his hand lifting the spoon. His face did not change much. It never did. But something deeper did, a fault line, a memory. This recipe, he said. I wiped my palms on my apron. Mine? No. His gaze lifted to mine. Older than you, my pulse thudded once. My mother. He set the spoon down very carefully. Teresa Rinaldi. The kitchen fell away. How do you know that name? But he had already stepped back, shut down. Whatever had flickered across his face vanished so completely I wondered if I had imagined it. Luca appeared behind him, tension in every line of his body. We found the copy, he said. I did not understand until Dante turned and took the paper envelope Luca handed him. A ledger page, photocopied, smudged but legible enough. My stomach dropped. It was sold, Luca said, not looking at me, to Viri's people. Tommaso Viri. I had heard that name too. Another Italian surname spoken the way weather warnings were spoken. Dante's jaw tightened by a fraction. How much? Enough to know Tavelli wasn't working alone. Rosa swore under her breath. Nico stopped breathing theatrically for once and just looked serious. I stared at the page. It means, Luca said, your face may now be attached to a problem. The kitchen suddenly felt too bright, too warm. Dante folded the paper once. The immediate question is how much you remember. I hated the answer before I gave it. More than I should. Good, he said. I laughed then because the alternative was crying in front of all of them. That is not how normal people use the word good. No, he said. But it is how survival works. He turned to leave, then stopped. Without looking at me, he said, do not make that dessert for anyone else. Nico's brows shot up. Rosa's mouth twitched. I was stupid enough to ask, why? Dante's hand flexed once at his side. Because I said so. Then he walked out. Nico waited exactly 3 seconds before whispering, that is in this house practically a sonnet. Rosa threw the towel at him. Later, when the kitchen had emptied and the sugar smell settled into the morning light, I stood alone at the steel counter and touched the broken edge of the dome. My mother's name was still ringing in my head, and somewhere upstairs a war had started moving. Dante Teresa Rinaldi had once hidden bread in her apron and fed a starving boy with blood on his cuffs and frost in his lungs. Years later, her daughter stood in his kitchen making the same orange blossom cream with steady hands and grief she did not yet know he recognized. Dante looked at the copied ledger page and felt the old, locked door inside him swing open a fraction. Tommaso had chosen his move. Fine, Dante would answer. But the girl with sugar burns and a liar's opportunity had told the truth again, and that was becoming a problem he could not afford. The attack came disguised as lunch. 4 men in suits, 1 florist box, 1 bottle of Barbersco with the wrong year on the label. Nico noticed first because, according to him, anyone who sends 2016 to this house either wants forgiveness or a body count. I was carrying a tray of coffee into the small dining room when the front bell chimed. By the time I reached the doorway, Luca had one hand under his jacket. Dante, seated at the end of the table with papers spread before him, didn't move at all. That should have warned me. The man holding the florist box smiled too much. For Mr. Salvetter. Nico looked at the label and muttered, oh, I hate his face. Then everything split open. The florist box hit the floor. Metal flashed inside the flowers. Luca shoved the nearest guard sideways. Someone shouted in Italian. I dropped the tray as Dante came to his feet in one smooth, terrifying motion. Down, he said. I obeyed before my mind caught up. Glass burst over the tile. The air filled with the sharp stink of gunpowder and roasted coffee. Nico fired once, twice. Luca kicked the table onto its side. Men who had seemed ornamental in the hallway suddenly had weapons in their hands and purpose in their bodies. I crawled on instinct, palms sliding through espresso and shattered porcelain. Somewhere ahead, Rosa screamed my name from the corridor. A hand locked around my ankle. I gasped. Not Dante, one of the attackers, bleeding from the shoulder and still reaching. His grip dragged me backward over slick tile. I caught the table leg, kicked, missed. Then the pressure vanished. The man made a sound I will hear until I die. I looked up. Dante stood over him, expressionless, one hand around the attacker's wrist bent the wrong way, the other holding a gun so close to the man's throat it was almost intimate. Touch her again, he said quietly, and I'll let you live long enough to understand your mistake. The attacker spat blood and something obscene. Dante shot him just like that, not rage. Not spectacle, efficiency so clean it made my stomach turn. He crouched in front of me immediately after, as if the gunshot had not happened, as if blood were not moving in a dark line toward my hand. Are you hit? I could not answer, not because I was injured, because I had watched him become what people whispered and then return to me in the span of a breath. His hand closed around my jaw, not hard, forcing my eyes to his. Sophia, no, the word broke out of me stupidly, his gaze sharpened. No, you're not hit. No, I whispered. No, he let go at once. Good move. He stood, hauled me up by the elbow and pushed me toward the kitchen corridor with his body between mine and the room, more shouting from the front. 2 men down, one of Dante's guards clutching his thigh. Nico cursing in language inventive enough to deserve an award. I stumbled into the kitchen. Rosa grabbed my shoulders. You breathe now, Piskai? I nodded and immediately failed to do it properly. She swore and shoved me toward the back pantry. Water. Sit. Instead, I kept walking because the room felt too small, too bright, too full of gunshot smell. I pushed through the wrong door. Cold hit me like a wall, the freezer. The heavy metal door swung almost shut behind me on its automatic hinge with a thud that sounded too much like ending. Shelves of meat and wrapped stock crowded the narrow space. White light buzzed overhead. Air stabbed my lungs. I turned to leave too fast, slipped on condensation, and the door slammed fully closed. The latch caught. For one ridiculous second I thought, not this. I yanked the handle. Nothing, again, nothing. The cold moved straight into my bones. Panic came with it, fast and humiliating. I hit the door with both palms. Open, voices outside, muffled, no answer. My breath went ragged. The white light above me trembled, or maybe I did. I knew rationally that someone would hear. That I had been inside less than 10 seconds, that I was not a child and this was not death. None of that mattered. Please. Then, through the metal, a sound, click, not the latch, a lighter. 1 second later, the freezer door slammed open so hard it bounced off the stopper. Dante stood there breathing harder than I had ever seen, gun in one hand, silver lighter in the other, his face stripped of color. For a moment he didn't look like a king or a criminal or anything remotely untouchable. He looked hunted. His eyes found me. Took in the wall at my back, my shaking hands, the air I could not get enough of. He crossed the threshold at once and gripped my upper arms. Sophia, I made some awful choking sound. You are out, he said. His voice was low and steady and fighting something underneath it. Look at me, you are out. The freezer hummed around us. My hands were numb, so were his. I blinked up at him and realized, with a shock almost as sharp as the cold, that his hands were shaking. Exactly once. Then they stopped. He got me moving before the panic could deepen. Out of the freezer, through the kitchen, into the scullery where no blood reached. He sat me on a wooden chair and crouched again, coat open now, tie loose, a dark fleck of someone else's blood near his cuff. Rosa appeared with a blanket. Nico followed with a bruise forming across one cheek and said, I would like it entered into the official record that lunch was extremely rude. Rosa smacked his shoulder. Not now. When then? In morning, despite the cold still trapped in my bones, a broken laugh escaped me. It hurt. Nico brightened painfully. Good, excellent, she still has sarcasm. That's circulation. Luca came to the doorway, one hand pressed to his side. House is secure. Dante did not look away from me, and, one got away, silence. That meant this was not over. I knew it from the way the room tightened. From the way Dante's mouth went flat. He rose. The loss of his hands on my arms felt immediate and wrong. Luca, he said, double the perimeter. No one in or out without my word. Luca nodded and left. I heard myself say, why did you know? Dante paused. The freezer, I said. My voice was still thin with leftover panic. Why did you know where I was? Nico and Rosa both became suddenly fascinated by the walls. Dante looked at me for a long moment. Then he answered with less than the truth and more than nothing. Because locked cold rooms make me impatient. He turned away. That should have been the end of it. But as he reached the door, I said the most dangerous thing I could have said. You were afraid. The room emptied of sound. Dante stopped with his back to me. When he spoke, each word landed separately. Do not mistake urgency for fear. Then he walked out. Rosa wrapped the blanket tighter around my shoulders. Nico crouched beside my chair and offered me a paper-wrapped chocolate he had somehow kept through an armed attack. Emergency ration, he said solemnly. I was saving it for my next dietary collapse, but this seems bigger. I took it, because my hands still shook. Because I had watched Dante Salvetor kill a man and pull me out of a freezer like he was yanking himself through time. Because I had seen one crack in him and now could not stop staring at where it had been. The fast answer came that evening. Tavelli had copied the ledger for Tommaso Viri before Dante got to him. My memory of the missing lines made me a map, and maps got taken. I was no longer just inconvenient. I was worth coming for. I made my mistake on a Thursday. That detail matters because Thursdays had always felt harmless to me. My mother used to bake fennel bread on Thursdays. Marco used to come home from school on Thursdays with grease on his sleeves and impossible plans. Even now, the city felt slightly softer on Thursdays, as if the week had exhausted itself enough to loosen its jaw. I should have known better than to trust a day. Marco called at 10 in the morning while Luca was in a meeting and Dante was out. I saw his name flash across my screen in Luca's office, and because I had spent a lifetime cleaning up after him, I answered before duty could beat instinct. Soph, his voice was too bright. Wrong. Where are you? Does it matter? Yes, a laugh quick and false. Good to hear prison hasn't taken your personality. I shut the office door. Marco, silence. Then I need money. Of course he did. I pressed my fingers to my eyes. I don't have any. You're in that man's house. I froze. How do you know that? People talk. Which meant the wrong people talked. Marco, listen to me carefully. You stay away from here. You do not ask questions about Dante Salvetter. You do not say my name to anyone who doesn't already know it. Another silence. Longer. I knew then, before he admitted anything, that he was already in something deeper than debt. What did you do? Nothing. Liar. His breath shook over the line. I borrowed from men I thought were smaller than they are. My knees wanted to give. Who? He did not answer. I did not need him to. Tommaso Viri, I whispered. Don't say names. I almost threw the phone through the office window. You stupid selfish. I was trying to get enough together to help you. By gambling, by winning, he snapped, then sounded ashamed of it. Soft, they know where you are. They think if I can get a message to you. The office door opened. Luca stood there, expression unreadable. I closed my eyes. Marco was still talking, frantic now. Sophia. Sophia, listen. Luca held out his hand. I gave him the phone. He ended the call without a word. I waited to be shouted at, judged. Confined to a smaller room, perhaps one without windows and with more men pretending not to look at me. Instead, Luca leaned against the desk and said quietly, How long has your brother owed Viri? I stared at the rug. Months, and you did not think this relevant? I was trying to handle it. That, he said, is not the kind of sentence people survive in our world. Shame burned hotter because he sounded tired rather than cruel. I know, no, Luca said, I don't think you do. When Dante came back an hour later, I was in the kitchen making Pei to chew with enough force to insult the bowl. Rosa had wisely not asked questions. Nico had entered once, seen my face, and retreated with the survival instinct of a man in love with a woman who threw spoons. Dante came in alone. The room changed around him. It always did. Rosa took one look at his expression, nodded to herself, and left. Nico followed, whispering, If anyone asks, I died bravely. Then it was only the two of us, the stove heat and the smell of butter and flour thickening in the pan. Dante stood across the counter. You spoke to your brother. Yes, you broke a rule. Yes, you exposed this house. I gripped the wooden spoon harder. Yes, he said nothing after that, which was somehow worse. Finally, I set the spoon down before I snapped it. Are you going to keep asking questions you know the answers to? His eyes lifted to mine. No. I'm deciding how angry to be. That landed in the center of me, not because I feared anger, because I heard the care hidden under it and did not know what to do with that. I didn't tell him anything, I said. You answered. He's my brother, and I am not interested in whether your reasons were sentimental. The words cut clean. I flinched before I could stop it. His jaw tightened. There was a long, awful pause. Then he said, quieter, That was not what I meant. I laughed once. I'm relieved. He took one step closer. What did he tell you? So I told him. Debt, Tommaso, men asking questions, the shape of danger tightening. I expected interruption, judgment. I got concentration. When I finished, Dante's gaze had gone very still. He is being used, he said. Marco is always being used. No, his voice sharpened. He is being positioned. I hated that he was probably right. My hands had started moving again without permission, piping chew rounds onto parchment in neat circles. Work steadied me. Dante watched the motion. What are you making? Saint Honoré components. For what occasion? I almost said nothing. Instead, I heard myself answer, for when I can't say what I mean. His eyes flicked to my face. Heat climbed my neck. I should have kept my mouth shut. Instead, I kept going because nerves made me stupid. Pastry is easier than talking. I had noticed. That was nearly humor. Nearly. The chew baked. I cooked sugar to amber. Whipped orange cream with mascarpone until it held soft peaks. Without planning to, I built something different from the composed elegance Rosa preferred. Dark caramel on the bottom, bitter coffee custard in the middle, a crown of fragile sponge sugar on top. Dante watched from the other side of the island as if I were speaking in a language he recognized and disliked needing. When I finished, he said, What is it called? I stared at the dessert. Mercy, I said. The kitchen went silent around the word. He looked at me for a long time. You don't know much about mercy. No, I said. But I know what people call it when they've already decided not to give it. A muscle moved in his jaw. Then slowly he reached for the plate and tasted it. Something changed in his face, not peace. He was not a peaceful man, but recognition again, that awful sense that I had brushed against a door in him without meaning to. You remember flavors the way you remember numbers, he said. Yes, how much of Tavelli's ledger can you reconstruct? I set both hands on the counter to steady myself. Most of it. That was when he finally looked surprised. Write it down, he said. I need to see the copy. You will? I shook my head. No, I need to smell the wine-stained paper. His brows drew together. Why? Because memory lived in layers for me. Scent, temperature, angle, rhythm. Because my brain was absurd and faithful. Because orange blossom could bring back my mother's wrists in summer, and the wrong tannin could pull an entire page of numbers out of the dark. I said because that's how I remember. He held my gaze another moment, then nodded once. Fine. He reached into his jacket, set Tavelli's copied page on the counter, and slid it toward me. Our fingers almost touched, almost. His hand stopped a breath from mine. Mine did not move away, the silence stretched, then he withdrew first. That hurt in a way I could not explain. By evening I had reconstructed enough numbers, shipments, and peer dates to make Lucas swear and Dante go cold with focus. By nightfall one fact had become clear. Tommaso already had men inside one of Dante's shipping routes, and someone in this house had told him where to strike next. Betrayal was no longer a possibility, it had started breathing. The ambush happened because I thought blood would make Marco honest. It happened because Lucas said stay inside and I heard instead, maybe you can still save him. It happened because innocence is not the same thing as wisdom, and by then I was starting to understand the difference too late. Marco sent a text just before dusk. St. Agnes Chapel, 15 minutes. Alone, I can fix this, I knew better. I went anyway. Nico caught me at the side entrance with a scarf over my hair and murder in my posture. Where, he asked, are you sneaking badly to? I'm not sneaking badly. You are wearing guilt like perfume. I just need air, he squinted. That is the face of a woman about to ruin my evening. I should have stopped, truly, he looked so sincere in his irritation. Instead I said, please, Nico. Something in my voice made the joke leave his face. Sophia, I have to try, he exhaled through his nose. I hate everybody in this family, including the people not biologically connected to me. I thought he would drag me back inside. Instead he rubbed a hand over his mouth and muttered, you have 10 minutes before I become responsible. By the time I reached St. Agnes, the bells had finished ringing 6. The chapel steps were slick with old rain. Candles guttered red inside the vestibule. Marco stood under the stone arch looking younger than 30 and older than ruin. Soph, I went to him too fast and then stopped short when I saw his split lip, his shaking hands. What did they do to you? His laugh cracked. Less than I deserved. Who? He looked over his shoulder like he had already his escape route memorized and his apology already chosen. Soph, he said again, and this time the word was wetter. Rower, you have to go, my chest tightened. Tell me what happened. I told them you'd come. The chapel seemed to tilt under me. Marco shut his eyes like he deserved the blow he couldn't stop. They said they'd cut my fingers off first. Then yours. I thought if I got here before them maybe I could get you out. I stared at him. There are moments when love does not leave you. It just steps backwards so horror can fit in the room. You sold me, I whispered. His mouth shook. I came back. Men moved at the edge of the square, one from the alley, two from the parked sedan. A fourth at the side gate with a gun low against his thigh and patience in his face. Tommaso's kind of patience, borrowed from cruelty. Marco saw them when I did. Run, he shoved me hard enough that I stumbled down one wet chapel step instead of freezing on it. The first shot cracked stone where my shoulder had been, then the square erupted. I ran because bodies behind guns make decisions quickly. I ran because survival is not noble. I ran because Marco yelled my name and then didn't again. A black sedan cut across the street too fast and stopped sideways, blocking the second car. The driver's door opened before the wheels fully did. Nico got out swearing. I hate being right, gunfire answered him. He fired back from behind the hood, tie flung over one shoulder, face bright with furious concentration. Sophia, if you die after I specifically worried about this, I will never forgive you. I was half laughing, half sobbing when a hand caught the back of my coat and yanked me into the shelter of the church wall. Not Nico, Dante. There was blood on his collar and more across one knuckle, not all of it his. He must have come straight from whatever meeting he abandoned to get here. His expression was carved from something harder than rage, that terrible glacial focus that meant a body count was already forming in his head. Stay behind me, I should have argued, I didn't. He pushed me toward the side alley with one hand at my back, gun in the other. The silver lighter flashed once when his coat shifted, ridiculous and intimate among all the black metal. Click, shut. Habit under pressure, another shot, brick burst overhead. Marco staggered into view near the chapel rail, one hand clamped over his side. One of Tommaso's men grabbed his coat and dragged him backward. Dante, I heard myself scream. He knew what I meant without looking at me. He moved. I had never seen speed like that, not wild. Precise. He crossed the wet pavement in 3 long strides, fired once into the man holding Marco, once into the second who lifted his weapon too late. Then drove the third into the iron gate with enough force to ring the whole square. Nico barked left. Dante turned and shot the fourth man through the windshield before the door finished opening. Silence hit all at once after gunfire, not true silence, sirens far off. My own blood in my ears. Marco choking on pain at the chapel rail. Nico ran to check the bodies, muttering, "I'm too pretty for this. I have cheekbones to protect." Then he glanced at Marco and grimaced. "Ah, he's not dead. Excellent. Inconvenient, but excellent." Dante stood over Marco without offering a hand. My brother looked up at him with rain and shame on his face. "I didn't know if they'd kill her." "You knew enough," Dante said. I flinched. Marco saw it and looked at me instead. "Saf, I'm sorry." Sorry was such a small word. People kept trying to pay catastrophic debts with it. Dante bent, hauled Marco upright by the front of his coat, and all but threw him at Nico. "Put him in the back. If he bleeds on my seats, charge him." Nico blinked. "You see, this is why morale fluctuates." Then he got Marco moving. My knees had begun to shake in earnest now that I was not running. Dante turned to me, his gaze dropping once over my body, face, throat, hands, ribs, legs, counting damage. "I'm fine," I said. His jaw tightened. "No, little lioness, you are not." The name landed differently this time, still possessive, but threaded through with something rougher. Relief, maybe. Anger at himself for feeling relief. Rain had started properly now, fine and cold. It gathered in his hair, on his lashes. Blood darkened one sleeve near the bicep. "You're hurt, not enough to matter. Take the coat off." His eyes lifted to mine. That was the first intimate thing between us. Not a kiss, not a touch. Me making the mistake of caring out loud and him hearing everything inside it. "Sophia," he said, "please." For one suspended second I thought he would refuse. Then slowly he shrugged out of the coat. The white shirt beneath it was cut open high on the arm, not a bullet lodged in him but a graze torn deep enough to matter more than he claimed. I swallowed hard and stepped closer. Rain, blood, cold wool, the scent of him under it all, dark and clean and impossible now not to know. "I need the car kit," I said. "It's in the trunk," Nico called. "Also, if this turns romantic, I need advance warning because Marco is crying back here and the atmosphere is poor." Even Dante almost looked amused. I took the kit from Nico with trembling fingers and led Dante inside the chapel vestibule, where votive candles threw soft gold over stone and saints looked away on purpose. He sat because I told him to. I cleaned the wound because my hands needed work or they would betray me. He watched my face more than he watched what I was doing. I could feel it. "You followed me," I said quietly. "Nico delayed reporting your absence by 4 minutes." I glanced toward the door. "He'll never forgive himself. He will survive it. Will you?" That made him still. I tied the bandage and kept my eyes on the knot because looking at him felt more dangerous now than the square had. After a long moment he said, "Do you want the truth?" "Yes." His voice dropped lower. "The night I saw you on that floor, crying and still standing in front of the boy." He stopped, as if the admission itself cut. "Everyone in my world learns to offer someone smaller when the bill comes due. You didn't. You shook and you told me the truth anyway." I looked up then. Rain tapped the chapel glass. Candle flame moved in the draft. His face was close enough now that I could see the restraint in it like a wound being held shut by hand. "That," he said, "was the first mistake you made with me." My breath caught. "And the others." His fingers closed around the edge of the pew, "Not me. You keep making me notice." That silence between us became a thing with temperature. He reached up once, slowly enough to let me move, and touched the bruise still fading at my cheek from Carlo's ring. His knuckles were gentle. The gesture was not. I didn't step back, almost. His thumb rested there 1 second too long. Almost. Then he dropped his hand and stood. Outside, Nico was arguing with Marco about whether bleeding on leather counted as a personal attack. Inside, my whole body had gone strange and bright and frightened. Dante took his coat from my arms. "Tommaso made his move," he said. The softness was gone from his tone, steel back in place. "What does that mean?" I asked. He looked toward the rain-dark square where 2 of Tommaso's men would never stand again. "It means," he said, "war has arrived." War, I learned, did not always sound like gunfire. Sometimes it sounded like phones vibrating at 3 in the morning. Sometimes it sounded like men speaking Italian too quietly in hallways where they usually joked. Sometimes it sounded like Rosa setting down a coffee cup without comment because she had already heard bad news and knew more was coming. 3 days after the chapel, one of Dante's warehouses burned on the Brooklyn side. A driver went missing. 2 more shipments never made port. Luca stopped pretending he was not sleeping in his office. Nico developed a twitch under one eye and claimed it was diet-related stress, which fooled absolutely no one. Marco was locked in a second-floor guest room with a medic and more guilt than stitches. He had not seen me since the chapel except once across the hallway, when his eyes met mine and then lowered because some shame can't survive direct light. I told myself I didn't want to see him either. That was not entirely true. The house shifted into wartime discipline, new faces at security, fewer lights left on. Dante home even less and somehow more present in every room because absence has weight when it belongs to one person. The first message from Tommaso came in a pastry box. Rosa opened it before I could. Inside lay 6 perfect cannoli and Paolo's work apron folded small and neat with a line of blood across the pocket. My knees nearly went out. Paolo was alive. Tommaso's attached note said so. For now, witnesses cost people. Ask your little lioness how many she can afford. Dante read it once and went so still the air around him hardened. Paolo, I said. He's 17. I know, this is because of me. No, he folded the note and slid it into his pocket with a calm that frightened me more than shouting would have. This is because Tommaso mistakes children for leverage. That doesn't change the math. His eyes came to mine. Do not reduce yourself to a ledger. I already did that when I stayed. Something flashed across his face. Anger, not at the words, at the fact that I believed them. Nico, standing by the island with a protein bar he clearly hated, muttered, I would like to file a formal complaint against villains who ruin dessert. Rosa smacked his arm without heat. It should have been funny, it almost was. Then the back alarm screamed. Everything happened at once. Luca shouted from the corridor. Security ran. Dante moved toward me before I understood why. The kitchen window exploded inward. I dropped. Dante caught my shoulder and drove me to the floor behind the island as glass rained over steel and tile. Rosa cursed in a language that deserved sainthood. Nico, who had apparently been forged inside chaos, threw himself over her and yelled, If I die in this ugly shirt, tell everyone I had options. The second shot came from the garden. The third hit the hanging copper rack. Then Nico jerked hard against Rosa and went dead weight for a breath. Nico, she snapped. Nico, he hissed between his teeth. I've been better. Blood spread across his sleeve near the shoulder. Something inside me tore open. I crawled toward him before anyone could stop me. Dante swore, caught the back of my dress, and hauled me behind him at the exact second a bullet punched into the cabinet where my head had been. Stay down. Nico was trying absurdly to sit up. Rosa, he gasped, face white now. If I die, tell people I was brave and broad-shouldered. You are narrow and impossible, she said, already pressing a towel to his wound. Her hands did not shake. Her mouth did. Luca's men cleared the garden in under a minute. 1 dead shooter, 1 missing. The usual ratio now, it seemed, between blood found and blood promised later. When the gunfire stopped, Dante turned and found me staring at Nico's blood on Rosa's hands. My voice came out thin. He was covering her. Yes, he was joking. Yes, that was the part my body could not understand. That humor could survive right up to pain in this world, and pain could keep speaking after it arrived. Nico looked at me through clenched teeth and managed, Please note I took a bullet while mostly avoiding carbohydrates. There is no justice. Rosa made a broken sound that was half sob, half laugh. They took him upstairs. The house closed around the wound. Medics, orders, mops, men with gloves, violence cleaned off surfaces before it could finish sinking into them. I stood in the wreck of the kitchen with powdered glass under my slippers and finally knew, what proximity to Dante cost everyone around him. Not in theory, in flesh. That night, after Paolo was recovered from an abandoned bakery in Queens and Nico was stabilized with enough pain medication to confess his feelings to a lamp, Dante came to my room carrying a passport and a train ticket. I looked from one to the other and felt the world begin to lean. What is this? An exit. The words hollowed me out. He set both on the dresser. Name is real enough. The destination is Boston. A woman there owes me favors and runs a pastry school with more security than sense. You leave at dawn. My throat closed. You're sending me away. I am keeping you alive. I laughed once, ugly and helpless. That sounds very noble when you say it. His gaze did not move. It is practical, practical. I repeated it because if I didn't, I would have to hear what else it was. Rejection, protection, loss. And Paolo and Nico and Rosa. People keep bleeding because I'm here. People bleed because Tommaso is alive. Same result. No, for the first time, force entered his voice. Not the same result. I folded my arms to keep them from reaching for him. You told me this was containment. It was, and now, he looked at the ticket, not me. Now it is triage. That hurt more than it should have, maybe because it was kind, maybe because it was not kind enough. I can help, you have, I remember the routes, the numbers. I know Marco's habits. Tommaso's using old kitchens and church properties because you don't watch places that look holy enough. His eyes narrowed slightly. How do you know that? Because people who hide in plain sight always pick places no one wants to search thoroughly. My mother used to say piety is the cheapest disguise in the city. His expression shifted when I mentioned her. It always did. Still, he shook his head. Not enough? For whom? For me. The room went still. There it was, beneath all the efficiency and orders and restrained brutality. One naked piece of truth, not enough for me. I could not breathe around it. He stepped closer, then stopped himself, a full arm's length. The distance mattered because he made it matter. You leave at dawn, little lioness. I hated the softness in the name, hated that it made tears rise. Don't call me that if you're sending me away. Something in his face almost broke, almost. Then he turned and left. At 6:30 in the morning, I stood on the platform at South Station with the ticket in my glove and steam ghosting up from the tracks. Luca had brought me without commentary. He only said before the conductor called boarding, if you stay gone, he'll live with it. If you come back, nothing will ever be simple again. Not a threat. A fact. I looked at the train, at the future packed inside it. Stainless steel kitchens, white jackets, sugar spun for people who had never heard gunfire in a dining room. Then I thought of Nico bleeding while joking, Paolo's apron in a pastry box, Rosa's hands red and steady, Dante standing in my room pretending practicality was the only thing cutting him open. I thought of Marco upstairs in that house, half traitor, half brother, and I understood what leaving would cost. Not safety, not really. It would cost the version of myself that still believed I could remain clean by stepping aside. When the boarding call came, I tore the ticket in half. Then I walked back into the dark with my eyes open. If there is a specific feeling attached to deciding, fully deciding to ruin your own life for the people inside it, I have never found the right word for it. It was not courage. Courage sounds cleaner than it felt. It felt like nausea and clarity sharing the same body. When I got back to the Salvetter house, Luca looked at the ripped ticket in my hand and nodded once, as if some internal bet had been settled. I need the warehouse manifests, I said. He held the door open. I know. For the next 12 hours I worked in his office with ledger pages, copied routes, property maps, and every memory I wished I did not possess. My mother used to call it my curse gift. I could remember numbers after one glance, scents after one breath, sequences after one stumble. It was why recipes stayed with me, why lies bothered me. Why the wet tannin smell of Tavelli's spilled Barolo still sat behind my teeth. Tommaso's moves had rhythm, church, bakery, cold storage. Places where deliveries came often enough to hide one more crate, one more man, one more weapon. He reused fronts that made people lower their guard. He favored routes near old charitable properties connected to St. Agnes and the church kitchens that fed half the neighborhood on feast days. Here, I said, tracing a line across the map. He's using orange blossom cleaner on at least 2 sites. Luca looked up sharply. Cleaner? The apron Paolo wore smelled like it. The pastry box from yesterday did too. It's a stupid thing to notice, but cheap cleaners cling to cardboard. That brand is only sold wholesale through one distributor in Red Hook because my mother used to complain it masked butter with flowers. He stared at me. You tracked a criminal route through sanitation products. I tracked it through bad taste. That should have been impossible. And yet an hour later, one of Luca's men confirmed a deconsolidated list of Shell properties supplied by that exact wholesaler. One address surfaced twice, an old parish bakery near the river, decommissioned, walk-in freezer still functional. My stomach turned. Luca saw it happen. You do not tell Dante this alone. Why? Because if it is what we think, he won't hear the rest. But Dante was out intercepting another shipment and waiting felt unbearable. Marco, pale and stitched and impossible, was brought down to the office at my request. He looked at the map and knew the address before I finished saying it. I saw the truth move over his face like weather. Marco, I whispered, what did you do? His mouth opened, closed, then he sat down hard in the chair as if his knees had gone unnecessary. They said, he began, staring at his own hands, if I gave them one route in and one route out, they'd clear the debt. Cold spread through me. One route, he swallowed. I told them about the service lane on the east side of the house, and about your train this morning. Luca's expression changed from disciplined to murderous so smoothly it frightened me. Marco looked at me instead because mine was the only judgment he feared. I didn't think you'd come back. I laughed then, not because anything was funny, because grief sometimes needs a sound. You sold the road under my feet. His eyes filled. Soft, stop. My voice cracked on it anyway, just stop. He had loved me, he did love me, both things were true, neither prevented this. The alarm on Luca's phone flashed red. A guard's voice broke over the speaker. Movement at the east gate, delivery truck with parish markings, they're breaching. Luca swore and drew his gun. Safe room? Now, I should have gone. Instead, I grabbed the property file and the copied map because stupidity and usefulness have looked alike in me from the beginning. The corridor outside the office exploded into motion. Men shouting, Rosa hurting staff, Marco trying to rise and failing, Luca barking orders into 2 phones at once. Then the lights cut. Darkness dropped hard and total for 1 second before the emergency red strips along the floor kicked on. In that blood-colored dimness, someone slammed into me from behind, cloth over my mouth, one arm like iron around my ribs. I bit, kicked. Dropped the file on purpose so papers scattered under boots like white birds. Careful, a voice murmured at my ear. Tommaso asked for you breathing. Chloroform has a smell I will never confuse with anything again. Sweet and chemical in old movies made real. I tried not to inhale. Tried to go loose, then hard, then useless and heavy. The corridor tilted anyway. The last thing I saw before the world dimmed was Marco dragging himself by one hand across the red-lit floor, reaching for me. Too late. When I woke, my wrists were zip-tied in front of me, and orange plastic crates were stacked to the ceiling around a concrete room that smelled like flour gone stale, and something colder underneath. Freezer burn, I was in the parish bakery. Tommaso Viri stood 10 feet away in a camel coat, hands bare, silver at his temples and hunger in his eyes so familiar I understood at once why Dante hated him. Not because Tommaso was different. Because he was not different enough. Teresa's daughter, he said as if we were at dinner. I wondered when I'd meet you properly. I tasted bile. You kidnapped me. That feels informal. His mouth twitched. You sound like him already. Then you should be worried. Not yet, he came closer. Studying my face with the proprietary interest of a man who thinks everyone can be used once their angle is known. Your brother disappointed me. That makes two of us. Something like amusement passed through him. Good, keep that edge. It will help what? The waiting. He nodded toward the walk-in freezer door behind him. Every part of my body went cold. Tommaso saw the recognition and smiled without kindness. Ah. So he never told you, he didn't have to. I knew suddenly, with listener-sharp clarity and daughter-deep dread, that whatever had been locked in Dante all this time was on the other side of that steel memory. Tommaso turned to one of his men. Call Salvatore, tell him if he wants his little lioness, he'll come himself. Then he looked back at me, almost pitying. And tell him, he said, this time the door closes on purpose. Captivity was smaller than I imagined. That was the first strange thing, not small in scale. The bakery was large enough, the back rooms cold enough, the men outside the door armed enough. But captivity narrowed the world until everything was reduced to immediate measurements. Zip ties against skin, the drip from a bad pipe 3 rooms over, the time between footsteps, the smell of orange cleaner pretending it was not failing to hide freezer air. Tommaso left me in a prep room with steel tables, stacked flour sacks, and one hanging bulb that buzzed just slightly off rhythm. He took the map file from my coat pocket. He left the cheap chair. He left the fear. Men like him are always generous with fear. I sat very still and took inventory. Wrist ties tight but not impossible. Ankles free. One bent pastry scraper on the floor under the table, probably kicked there by someone less frightened on another day. Door closed, not locked all the way because arrogance does the work of laziness if you let it. I breathed through my nose and counted heartbeats until they slowed enough for thought to return. My mother used to say pastry teaches patience because sugar punishes panic first, so I did the only useful thing left to me. I got to work. It took 9 minutes to drag the scraper close enough with my heel. 12 more to wedge it awkwardly between my wrists and saw at the plastic with tiny, ugly movements that flayed my skin and made my shoulders burn. I stopped every time footsteps passed. Started again when they faded. By the time the tie gave, my hands were shaking so badly I laughed once out of disbelief. Good, I whispered to no one. Wonderful. I'm evolving. The outer room carried voices. Tommaso unhurried, another man laughing, and beneath it something else, a metallic click. My head snapped up. Not possible, not yet, not from here. But there it was again, faint and precise through 2 walls and a corridor. Dante's lighter, he was here. The realization hit like terror and relief being poured into the same glass. Gunfire broke the building open a second later. Shouts, running feet, someone screamed in Sicilian. The hanging bulb swayed, flour dust shivered off the sacks in pale puffs. I stood too quickly, grabbed the bent scraper like a ridiculous weapon, and opened the prep room door an inch. Chaos in the corridor. One of Tommaso's men was down by the proofer, bleeding into a tray rack. Another ran past toward the loading dock. Somewhere ahead, men were firing in short, disciplined bursts, the kind Dante's people used, not the panicked spray of cowards. Then Marco appeared. He lurched around the corner with one arm strapped badly from old stitches and fresh blood at his mouth. For a stunned second, we only looked at each other. You're alive, he said. It was such a stupid sentence I nearly cried. You shouldn't be here. I know, he put a keycard in my hand. Freezer override, I stole it. That cold moved through me again. Marco, I heard what Tommaso plans. His eyes were wild with it. I can't undo what I did, Soph, I know that, but I can do one thing right before I'm done. Footsteps thundered closer. He shoved me toward the rear corridor. Go, I'm not leaving you. You already lost enough trying. There are apologies that come too late and still matter because they cost something. This was one. He turned back toward the gunfire before I could answer. I grabbed his sleeve. Marco, he looked at me. I wanted to say I forgave him. I didn't know if I did. I wanted to say I loved him. That was easier and harder all at once. Instead, I said the only true thing I had. Don't make me be the one who remembers you wrong. His mouth broke, then he ran toward the sound of war. I made it halfway down the rear corridor before the freezer door slammed. Not behind me, ahead, a man shouted. Another body hit steel. Then the keycard panel beside the walk-in sparked dead under a bullet. My blood turned to ice. I ran anyway. The corridor opened into the cold room and everything inside me stopped. Dante had Tommaso pinned against the freezer jamb, one forearm to his throat, gun gone somewhere, blood at his temple and across his shirt. Tommaso smiled through split lips because some men love their own endings best when they think they chose the room for them. The freezer door hung open behind them, white air spilling out. Do it, Tommaso rasped. Close it, be the thing I made. Dante's face was beyond anger now, stripped down to the old wound itself. I saw it then with terrible clarity, not just that he feared cold rooms, but that he feared what cold rooms had built inside him. Tommaso saw me over Dante's shoulder and smiled wider. There she is. Teresa had the same eyes. Dante went still. The world narrowed to that sentence. I understood before he explained because the listener in any story always knows before the woman inside it does. My mother sent Agnes orange blossom cream, the look on Dante's face in Rose's kitchen. Tommaso laughed blood into his teeth. She fed you, didn't she? While your little sister froze because you followed orders. I moved before I thought, not toward Dante, toward the freezer control housing. The keycard panel was dead, but the emergency release inside the door still worked if the latch caught. I jammed Marco's override card into the manual slot and kicked the metal wedge lying beneath the threshold into place so the door could not fully seal. Dante, I said. He did not hear, or couldn't. So I crossed the last few feet and touched his wrist. The whole room changed. He looked at me as if surfacing from underwater. Not like this, I whispered. For one suspended second, I thought he might not come back, then his grip loosened. Tommaso used the opening. Of course he did. He drove a hidden knife toward Dante's ribs. I saw the movement, screamed, and hit Tommaso's arm with the bent scraper still in my hand hard enough to turn the blade. It sliced Dante's side instead of entering deep. He made no sound. He just finished it, one movement, one shot, efficient as ever. Tommaso crumpled against the cold steel he had tried to turn into theater. Then Dante stepped back once, looked at the body, and something went out of his face. Not life, harder to name than that. The last lie, maybe. The one where killing the man would heal the room he lost people in. He swayed. I caught him because my body chose before my mind could object. Outside, the building was still loud with aftermath. Inside the cold room, it was just us and white air and blood and history gone feral. Dante he had known from the first night. Not love, he would not insult the word by mistaking it early, but fixation, yes. The girl on the restaurant floor had shaken and still covered the boy with her own body while telling the truth that might cost her everything. No one in Dante's world did that. No one had since Teresa Rinaldi put bread into his hands and told him to keep Gemma warm until she came back, and then failed to come back in time. Now Sophia's hand was on his wrist, her voice pulling him away from becoming Tommaso in the only room designed to tempt him, and Dante understood that wanting her was no longer the dangerous thing. Losing the part of himself that could still hear her was. When the medics arrived, I refused to let go until Luca himself pried my fingers from Dante's bloody shirt. Nico appeared in the doorway with his shoulder strapped and announced hoarsely, "I leave one bullet wound unattended for 6 hours and everybody loses discipline." I laughed so hard it came out as a sob. Then they carried Dante out, and I followed through flour dust, gun smoke, and the knowledge that next time one of us might not come back. Tommaso died in the parish bakery. The war did not. Men like him do not build systems that end with their pulse. They build habits, debts, frightened loyalties, silent partners, and frightened young men who think cruelty is inheritance. By the time dawn washed the river gray, Luca had 3 names, 2 compromised routes, and one final location where Tommaso's surviving captain planned to move cash, records, and whatever leverage remained. Pier 14, of course it was Pier 14. The same line I had first remembered off Tavella's wine-soaked ledger, the first number that had tied me to Dante's world. The one that refused to stop mattering. Dante should have been resting. Instead, he stood in the downstairs study at noon with fresh bandages under a black shirt, and murder banked carefully behind his eyes while Luca argued with him in clipped Italian. "You lost blood, I found perspective. You need a doctor." "I had one," she scowls. I was in the doorway before I realized he meant me. He looked over at once. The room held for a second on that line between us. Too much already said, too much still unspoken. Nico lounged by the drinks cart with an arm in a sling and announced, "For the record, I support neither leadership style nor this family's ongoing war against convalescence." Rosa, carrying espresso, said, "No one asked. That has never stopped me." Something light flickered through the room and vanished, but even that mattered. Especially that on the desk lay the final warehouse diagrams. Cold storage, loading bays, freight elevator, service corridor. I crossed to them before fear could make me useless. "He'll move through here," I said, pointing, "not the main truck lane." Luca nodded once. "Why?" "Because he believes Dante expects theatrical exits. Tommaso trained them to perform. Men who survive him learn to imitate that. But this," I traced the narrower line near the freezer annex. "This is how you move records you're afraid to lose." Dante watched my hand on the map, not the map itself. "You're sure?" "Yes. You realize," Luca said carefully, "that if you're wrong we split manpower and lose containment." I met his eyes. "I'm not wrong." And for the first time I felt what it was to say that without apology. The operation moved at dusk. I should not have gone. Everyone said so. Luca with reason, Rosa with fury. Nico with the memorable phrase, "I have one usable shoulder and would still prefer not to supervise your martyrdom." I went anyway, not in front, never that. In the second vehicle with Luca, a vest too heavy for my body, Marco's override card in my coat pocket like a confession I couldn't throw away. Marco himself had died an hour after the bakery raid in an ambulance on the FDR, blood loss and bad choices finally collecting their due. I had not cried yet. There was no clean place to put grief while events kept moving. Pier 14 smelled like salt, diesel, rotting rope, and winter metal. Cranes cut the dark sky into black geometry. Men moved in whispers between stacked containers and the hulking warehouse doors. The harbor made every sound feel farther away and closer at once. Dante's silver lighter clicked inside the lead car before he got out. A private metronome, a promise. He never lit it, he just held the sound. The signal came through Luca's earpiece. Movement East Corridor, records on site, 4 vehicles, 9 visible. Then the night broke. Gunfire ran along the loading docks in disciplined bursts. One spotlight shattered. Men shouted from behind crates stamped with produce labels no one would ever trust again. Luca moved like calculation in human form. Nico, on restricted duty he absolutely ignored, fired one-handed from behind a forklift and yelled, "If I'm killed by people with no appreciation for posture, I'm haunting everyone." I stayed low until the first part of the plan held. Then I saw him, not Tommaso's captain, Dante, pursuing the last of them toward the freezer annex exactly where I had pointed, and because patterns are cruel my body followed. Inside the annex, cold bit immediately, smaller than the parish freezer. Cleaner, worse somehow for that, fluorescent lights hummed, shelves of seafood crates cast long shadows. A metal office cage stood open at the far end where hard drives and ledger boxes had been stacked for removal. Tommaso's captain, Sandro Bellini, had a gun on Dante and a laugh in his mouth. Sandro had been at the Salvator house twice. Dinner guest, hand kisser, man who complimented Rosa's sauce, trusted enough to come near. I felt sick. "So this is what's left of loyalty," Sandro was saying. "A girl with a memory and a dead man's ghost." Dante did not answer. He never wasted words on the doomed. Sandro's gaze flicked to me in the doorway, and that one mistake killed him. He smiled first. Men who underestimate women often do it with their mouths. I threw the override card at the light switch panel. The room plunged into half-darkness just as Dante moved. One shot, one impact, a body hitting crates. The gun skidding across concrete with a shriek that made my teeth ache. Then it was over, too quickly, too horribly. Exactly the way all final violence happens when the people inside it are competent enough. Dante stood over Sandro's body, breathing hard once, twice. Blood spread darker at his bandaged side where the movement had reopened something. Luca burst in behind me with 2 men at his back and stopped when he saw the scene. "Records?" Dante asked. "Recovered, witnesses, contained." He nodded. That should have been triumph. Instead there was a sound from outside, Rosa's name in Nico's voice, sharp with fear, and the whole room flinched toward it. Nico had taken another graze, shielding Luca's youngest runner. The boy lived. Nico lived, but the cost kept counting itself in people rather than totals, and that was harder to survive. I looked at Sandro on the floor and said, "He came to the house." Dante's eyes met mine. "Yes, you let him." "I did, because that was leadership in this world. You did not always know which snake was already under the table until it struck." Men carried out boxes, hard drives, cash. Bodies, the tide slapped black pilings below the dock. Somewhere behind us, Marco's body was being prepared for burial by hands that would not mention the shape of his sins to our faces. Dante came to stand in front of me. For a moment neither of us spoke. Salt air and freezer cold clung to him at once. The harbor lights turned his face severe and tired and more human than he ever permitted. "It is over," he said. I believed him, not because the world had become safe, it never would. Because the man who said it had paid for the sentence in blood, loyalty, and the last illusion that he could win clean. After the war, the house sounded wrong, too quiet in some places, too loud in others. Nico's voice echoed differently with one arm still healing and two near-death experiences to mine for drama. Rosa began cooking for twice as many people as before, which was either grief or love in the language she allowed herself. Luca moved through rooms with an exhaustion he wore like tailoring. We buried Marco on a Thursday under a sky the color of dishwater. I cried then, not prettily, not redemptively, just enough to understand that grief does not wait for moral clarity. Dante stood 3 rows behind me at the cemetery and said nothing. That helped more than comfort would have. Weeks passed, then 6. Pier 14's records turned into arrests in places too clean to acknowledge how dirty the route had been. Sandro's disappearance terrified 3 wavering allies back into obedience. Paolo came to the house once with flowers for Rosa and cried when Nico told him he looked emotionally underseasoned. The restaurant reopened under new management. And Dante told me I could return if I wanted. I didn't. Instead, I stayed in Rosa's kitchen, and then slowly, not just in her kitchen, I began rebuilding the dessert program for the restaurant, training apprentices, ordering ingredients under my own name. At night, I wrote applications I no longer sent anywhere else. The life I had imagined had not vanished, it had changed address. Dante and I were no better at easy things than before the war. He still stopped himself too often. I still mistook silence for rejection when I was scared. We had kissed exactly once since the bakery, in the dark pantry after Nico made a joke so terrible I fled on principle, and Dante followed to see whether I was laughing or crying. It had been brief and devastating and ended with his forehead against mine and both of us breathing like restraint was an injury. After that, there had been hands lingering, doorways held too long. My pulse wrecked nightly by the sound of his lighter snapping shut somewhere in the house, but nothing settled. Not until the night I found him in the library with Marco's watch on the desk between us. He did not look up when I entered. Firelight moved over shelves and polished wood. Rain ticked softly at the windows. The house had gone to sleep except for us. "I thought you'd dethrone it away," I said. "It was in your brother's effects." I came farther in. "Why do you have it?" "Because I was deciding whether to give it to you." I looked at the watch, cheap metal, scratched face. Marco wore it through every bad decision of his adult life. And I dislike sentimental objects. That almost made me smile. "You kept my mother's recipe in your head for years." His gaze lifted then, straight into mine. The room changed shape. "I kept your mother," he said quietly, "because she once fed 2 children who had no one else." I sat down without meaning to. He spoke as if each sentence had to be pulled through something narrow to reach me. "St. Agnes ran a soup line out of the basement in winter. Teresa worked there 2 nights a week. She used to smuggle bread and orange peels to Gemma because my sister liked sweet things and pretended hunger less when there was sugar." My throat hurt. "She knew you, she knew enough." His eyes dropped once to the watch, then returned. "The night Gemma died, Tommaso locked the freezer during a transfer gone bad to punish someone else. To teach everyone else. I was 17 and stupid enough to think obedience could save us. The old wound stood between us at last with its face uncovered." I whispered, "You couldn't get to her." His voice did not change. "No." I understood then why cold rooms made him stop breathing, why my panic in the kitchen freezer had looked like his own. Why he had recognized orange blossom cream like grief with a name. "I'm sorry," I said. He shook his head once. "I did not tell you so you would be sorry." "Then why tell me now?" He stood. Crossed the room. Stopped in front of me with that same terrible care he always used when he wanted something too much to touch it badly. "Because I am tired," he said, "of pretending the worst things about me are the only things relevant." The truth of that nearly undid me. My fingers closed around Marco's watch. "He loved me, I know. He betrayed me, I know. I still miss him." A shadow moved through Dante's face. "I know, no judgment. That was the unbearable part. He let contradiction live." I stood too. We were close enough now for the fire to warm one side of me and his cold stillness the other. "I chose to come back," I said, "not because I didn't understand what your world costs. Because I did." His eyes searched mine with a focus that made my heart turn over. "Say it again." My breath caught. "I knew." "No." He took the smallest step closer. "The other part, I could have lied then, protected myself, protected whatever remained of the old version of me who liked clean lines and unnamed desire. Instead, I said the thing that cost me. I came back for you." Silence. Then he closed his eyes, only for a second, but in that second I felt every place the admission landed in him. When he opened them again, the restraint was still there. It was just losing. His hand came to my face, slow enough to stop, warm enough to wreck me. Little lioness, he said, not cold now, not even possessive, something infinitely more dangerous. Home. He kissed me the way starved people first touch food they do not trust themselves with, careful, reverent, one breath from breaking. My hand caught in his shirt. His other hand flattened at my back and stayed there, steadying rather than taking. When I trembled, he stopped, waited. I don't know what I'm doing, I whispered against his mouth. His forehead rested to mine. Neither do I, that made me laugh and cry at once. Later, much later, after the kiss had deepened into something slow and sheltering, and we had said each other's names into the quiet like learning them over. He reached into his jacket and took out a ring box. I stared at it, his mouth twitched without humor. This is the part where a better man would kneel. You're wounded. I'm efficient. I laughed full this time, then he did kneel, not elegantly. Not like a fairytale prince, like Dante Salvator who had fought half the city for control and now looked up at me as if this cost more. I cannot promise you a harmless life, he said. I cannot promise that the darkness around me disappears because you are in it. I can promise that nothing I am will ever be used against you if I can still stand. I can promise honesty when it is ugly. I can promise that if you choose me, I will never call your courage a mistake again. My eyes filled too fast to stop. Sophia Rinaldi, he said softly, stay. Not marry me, not be mine, stay. I nodded before tears blurred him. Yes, he slid the ring on with hands that had killed for me and bandaged badly because I had tied them. It fit. Outside, rain moved gently over the city. Inside, the house held its breath and let us have one quiet, ordinary thing. 9 months later, the first thing people noticed about the restaurant was the dessert menu. The second thing they noticed was the security. Dante let me call that balance. Rinaldi at Salvator opened in early spring in the old space downtown after 6 months of permits, renovations, arguments over tile, and one spectacular shouting match between Rosa and an architect who suggested deconstructed tiramisu in a voice that deserved exile. We kept the front windows, we changed everything else. Warm walnut cream walls, old brass sconces, a pastry counter that faced the room like an invitation rather than an apology. Upstairs offices Dante used for legitimate meetings and occasionally illegitimate ones he did not discuss over my ganache. My life became specific in the best way. Butter by 6, sugar spun by 9. Inventory, staffing, Marco's watch tucked in the drawer by the invoices because grief had become less sharp and more constant. Nico recovered enough to return to full-time complaining and partial bodyguarding. He was engaged to Rosa now. Though he claimed she had agreed under emotional pressure and superior cheekbones, Rosa told everyone she accepted because finding another man willing to be corrected this often would be inefficient. Paolo worked weekends finishing high school, no longer jumping every time a man in a dark suit opened the door. And Dante came in every evening at close whether he had a reason or not. That night the dining room was nearly empty. Rain purled on the windows. The espresso machine sighed its last sigh. I was in the kitchen finishing a special order for a christening party the next day. Orange blossom cream, dark sponge, and a sponge sugar shell so thin it caught the light like breath. A crash came from the prep station behind me. I turned. Leo, our newest busboy, all elbows in panic, stood over a shattered tray of cooling caramel spirals with terror already drowning his face. 17, too thin, good kid, the kind who apologized with his whole spine. For one bright second the room split a long time, wine on tile, Paolo shaking, Carlo lying, me crying. Leo opened his mouth. I'm so sorry, Miss Sophia. The floor door from the office stair opened behind him. Men went quiet, click. The silver lighter snapped shut. I did not turn it once, I didn't have to. I felt Dante before I saw him now. The colder air brought in on his coat, the stillness that changed the room's posture, the impossible way my body knew him as weather and answer both. Leo saw him and went white. I stepped in front of the boy, not dramatically, instinctively, same as the first time, same as always. It was my fault, I said. I had him carrying a tray too full and moving too fast. The kitchen went very still. I looked down at the shattered sugar on the floor, then back at the boy behind me. Get the broom, I told him gently, and next time 2 trips. Leo vanished with gratitude spilling off him in waves. Only then did I turn. Dante stood in the doorway with rain darkening the shoulders of his coat and that old silver lighter balanced in one hand. For a moment he did not speak. Neither did I. Some things had not changed. The look in his face when I did that, when I covered someone smaller with the truth instead of convenience, was still one of them. But now I could read all of it. The memory, the ache. The wonder that such a simple reflex still struck him harder than gunfire ever had. He came closer across the kitchen's warm tile. You still do it, he said. I smiled a little. Apparently, his gaze dropped to the sugar shards, and it still costs you. Yes, He reached me and lifted one caramel thread from my sleeve where it had caught there like spun amber. His touch was careful, familiar, devastating in its quiet. It still lands the same way, he said. That was the closest he had ever come to telling me what it did to him. My throat tightened. Then I'm glad I never learned better. The edge of his mouth moved. From the dining room, Nico's voice drifted in. Rosa, my love, if marriage means fewer pastries thrown at my head, I'm prepared to enter it with humility. Rosa answered, it will mean more. He sighed theatrically. Then I enter it with courage. I laughed. Dante looked at me like he wanted to memorize the sound and hide it somewhere no one else could reach. The ring on my hand glinted under the prep light when I touched his tie. His bandage scars had faded. The one at his side remained a thin pale line I kissed sometimes when the world felt too loud. Come upstairs, I said softly. I saved you one. One what? I led him to the walk-in dessert cooler at the back, new, clean, bright, built with every safety mechanism money could buy. The first time it had been installed, he stood outside it for a full minute before entering. The first time he did enter, I went in with him. We have gone in together ever since. Inside, glass shelves held cakes, tarts, and tomorrow's cream in silver bowls. At the center sat one small plated dessert under a dome. He looked at it, then at me. Second skin? He asked. Improved, I said. He lifted the glass. I watched his hands, steady now, entirely steady. He tasted, closed his eyes once. When he opened them, there was no war in the room, no Tommaso. No freezer door in his face. Just this man, this life, the ordinary miracle of being able to feed someone after surviving the things that tried to starve them. He set the spoon down and reached into his pocket. The lighter clicked, not threat this time, not warning. He struck the flame and used it to light the tiny candle I had hidden in the sugar shell. Warm gold filled the thin amber dome from the inside. The same sound that opened the story closed it. Metal, flame, breath. Only now it meant home. He looked at me over the candlelight and said the nickname that had once felt like a claim and now felt like a vow. Little Lioness. I stepped into him and he opened without hesitation. His arms came around me. My cheek found his chest. Outside the cooler door the restaurant breathed on without us. Dishes, rain, Nico surviving love loudly. Inside it, the quiet was ours. Ordinary life, I learned, was the most radical thing we built. And still, some nights, I wondered about the price of choosing a man whose hands could end wars and light candles with the same silver lighter. Tell me this, would you have chosen Dante and let the safer life burn? Have you ever loved someone enough to walk back into the dark with your eyes open?